Hello, everyone. Welcome in. As everyone is logging in, I'm going to launch a poll just real quick. And it's just to see if you have attended a webinar with us before. If you want to just take a second to fill it out, that would be great. Okay. I'm going to leave that up for a minute as we get started here. I can see that people are already pouring in their responses, so fantastic. Welcome everyone to our webinar series. I see we do have some new people joining us, as well as a lot of people who have attended one before. So that's fantastic. I'll leave it open for just a few more seconds. Okay, ending it now. Okay, so before we begin, I'd like to tell you guys a little bit about Manhattan Psychology Group. Francine, if you'd like to go on to the next screen. Perfect. We were established in 2011 by Dr. Joshua Rosenthal and have continued to grow into a team of over 300 dedicated professionals. Our team includes skilled adult and child psychologists, neuropsychologists, behavior analysts, special educators, and ABA therapists. As a team, we're committed to wraparound care, which includes our wide range of services from mental health and testing to ABA and educational services. This holistic approach allows us to address various needs and challenges with compassion and care. We provide services to clients out of our Upper West Side and Long Island City offices, in-home, school, and clinic-based settings, as well as through telehealth. Our team is committed to serving individuals, couples, and families of all ages in diverse settings. We're also pleased to offer these free monthly webinars to parents and professionals where we continue to learn and foster meaningful connections. Our vision at NPG is to create a future where individuals and their families feel supported, connected, and empowered. Our mission is to provide a multidisciplinary integrated support for individuals and their families who experience mental health, behavioral, and educational challenges. As a reminder, this webinar is not eligible for any CEUs, and any questions you have during the presentation can be put in the Q&A. If there's time at the end of the presentation, our presenters will take time to answer some of these questions. All right, and now I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Dr. Francine Zeltzer and Chantal Aflalo. Dr. Francine Zeltzer is a New York State licensed psychologist. She received her undergraduate degree in psychology from Binghamton University and completed her graduate degree at St. John's University. Dr. Zeltzer is the Director of Mental Health and Testing at MPG, who oversees a team of licensed psychologists, neuropsychologists, and psychotherapists who provide counseling and assessment services to children and adolescents and adults with disabilities. Additionally, she coordinates the Psychology Internship and Postdoctoral Fellowship Training Program, which prioritizes direct care, learning opportunities, supervision, and professional growth. Dr. Zeltzer provides cognitive behavior therapy and parent management training. Her primary specializations are in child and adolescent development, behavior management, family counseling, educational interventions, psychological and educational assessment, effective parenting strategies, consultation, and educational advocacy. Dr. Zeltzer promotes supportive, problem-solving approach where her patients learn adaptive strategies to manage challenges and work towards achieving both short and long-term goals. She helps patients navigate a variety of challenges such as how to improve focus, social skills, time management, reduce negative emotions, build a growth mindset, resolve conflict, and get organized. Her integrative approach enables her to provide high-quality, evidence-based treatments to address a diverse and unique needs of her patients. Chantal works as an educational advisor who offers families guidance when searching for mainstream schools from pre-K to 12th grade, and specialized schools such as special education schools, supportive mainstream schools, and onboarding schools for individuals from pre-K to 12th grade. She provides a thorough review of the student's academic, social, and emotional needs in order to determine the most optimal educational settings. She supports families from the application process through admission. Chantal receives her BA from Marymount Manhattan College and an MBA from the Stern School of Business at NYU. She's a school advisor with the Parents League, a board member with Children's Academy, a member of the JCC Committee for their yearly Special Needs School Fair, and a former volunteer for the Resources for Children with Special Needs. Chantal has developed connections with numerous schools and placement settings, which allows families to navigate the mainstream and special education application process with less stress and more confidence. And now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Dr. Zeltzer and Chantal.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I will start by going over the objectives of today's workshop. So today we're going to talk about the application process for different private schools and how families can manage the stress that comes along with this application process. So today, participants will learn strategies that both parents and caregivers can use throughout the school application process so that they feel prepared. We will help participants understand the impact of the school application process on mental health and resources and provide strategies to relieve stress. And you will receive information on evaluations that might be needed to identify schools that might best fit your child or a student that you're working with. All right, Chantal.
Thank you so much, Francine. It's so nice to be part of this webinar this morning. I appreciate being invited by MPG. I hope that we'll also be able to help families and guide professionals through this process by giving them information about every step that they'll be involved in, and discussing different types of evaluations and testing that families will be involved in as well. As you said, we'll be concluding with some guidance on how to keep the process manageable and as stress-free as possible. So,
Chantal, before you start, I wanted to mention that we have the chat box closed currently, but we will leave the Q&A open. So if anyone has any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop it in the Q&A. We could try to answer it throughout the presentation. We'll both write the answer in the chat box and verbally answer it, or we'll address it at the end and we'll open the chat box at that time.
fabulous.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. I appreciate you including that information. So when thinking about an admissions process, it's important to visualize the time span in which you'll be engaged in preparing for a school transition. It's hard to believe that you need to think about this more than a year in advance, but that is the uncomfortable truth. When considering a transition for September of 2025, in reality, you begin the process now during the spring of 2024. So actually a whole year prior. In the spring of 2024, for special education applicants, you need to schedule your evaluations and think about whether you want to have them updated or if you need a new one. And scheduling in the early spring will really guarantee that you get a place with a neuropsychologist because their schedules are so busy, and you certainly want to have that testing done between the spring and the summer. So you'll usually need an evaluation that is current, no more than 2 years old. However, if you've noticed changes in the last year of your child's development, you may want to update that evaluation, even if it's less than 2 years old. And this will allow schools to be able to have the most current information about your child's learning, attention, social, and emotional needs. Later in the spring and into the summer, this is a time to start putting together your school list and attending spring tours, which are provided by many of the mainstream schools and some of the specialized schools as well. During the summer, this is also a good time for students who are applying to mainstream private schools to begin their prep for any IC exams. And IC and prep is for, the IC test is usually applicable for 2nd through 12th grade, usually 11th grade. In any case, that gives your child ample time to have exposure to the test and learn strategies by working with either a professional who's trained in giving the prep or practicing at home with the guidelines provided by the services of the IC and SSAT exams. Moving on, we're now in the fall of 2024. See how quickly that went by? Anyway, once you have a school list, you can begin creating a spreadsheet to help you manage your school deadlines. By the end of August through Labor Day, private schools will have admissions information and their applications available on their websites. This will help you plug in all the pertinent deadlines, including application due dates and when you've scheduled your admissions appointments for an open house, tour, interview, and any other admissions events you'll be attending. I recommend getting a jump start on mainstream school initial applications. It's helpful to get these done by the end of October. In fact, some mainstream schools do not allow you to schedule your admissions appointments until the initial application is complete. So just to be clear, there are two parts to a mainstream school application, the initial application and then the secondary application, which is due later on in January. But the initial application is something that you can get a head start on, sometimes even in August. As of August 1st, many of the private schools will have their websites up and ready and able to, they will be able to tell you what the application process will be and even have some applications available, but they won't be starting to accept them until after September 1st, usually after Labor Day. Official due dates for mainstream school initial applications are between November and December, which means you want to keep track of each school's applications, as each of the private schools have their own deadlines. And that is something that you'll want to make sure that you're paying very close attention to, because sometimes you cannot apply for, you can't self-schedule rather for any appointments like interviews until you have that initial application completed. So that's one of the reasons why I really want families to ignore the deadlines of November and December and try and get them done by the end of October. That puts you in a better position for planning purposes. Special education schools typically have rolling admission. However, during the admission season, these schools have deadlines for their applications, usually between November and December. It's recommended you apply early by the beginning of November. There's only one application to submit for special education schools, but you want to be part of the early applicants so that if for some reason you apply too late, you're not considered in a secondary pool of applicants. So it's important to get that out early. So now we're heading into the winter. And in the special education world, schools typically provide their first wave of acceptances by the end of December, or sometimes the beginning of January. And each school will provide its accepted families a deadline to respond to that acceptance. And that deadline is usually not a very long period of time to give you to think about it. Sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's a little bit more. Sometimes they'll allow you until February 1st. And once that deadline is passed, if you haven't accepted the position, then you may go into a wait pool, or the schools will move on to sending their second group of applicants acceptance letters. So you want to be mindful of those deadlines as well. By January 10th to 12th in 2025, the second part of the mainstream private school application is due. And that is a date that is designated by the ISAGNY, the Independent School Admissions Association of Greater New York. And this is this year, the deadline for 2024 was January 11th. It's usually between the 10th and the 12th. And the second part of the application includes a lot of the information that you're gathering from your schools, transcripts, teacher recommendations, IC reports. All of these things have to be complete by the deadline so that your file can be reviewed by the admissions committee. Throughout the month of February, this is when acceptance notifications are provided for mainstream private schools. Acceptance dates are defined again by the ISAGNY and are different for each division. So there's a separate deadline for giving notification for kindergarten, grades 1 through 8, grades 9 through 12. And there's also another ISAGNY deadline for when you have to respond to the schools with a signed contract and your deposit. And that is usually anywhere from a week to 3 weeks from the time that you are notified. Okay. So
I have a question, Chantal. So then our families that are navigating this process, are they choosing a pathway of either a private school, the mainstream school, or the special education schools, or do some families apply for both?
Sometimes families apply for both. That's an excellent question, Francine, because it is the case that you can be applying to some supportive mainstream schools as well as schools that are more specialized. Because if you're not sure what could be the best option, you may be looking at both. And again, that's when a neuropsychologist would be helpful in guiding that kind of decision, as well as anyone you're working with privately, an educational advisor. But you do at times have families applying to both. On most occasions, you're applying to one or the other. And within the mainstream realm, you may be applying to supportive mainstream or mainstream schools that have no support, and in which you would be considering an outside support program on your own. But usually the case is you have a direction of whether you need a specialized environment versus a full-on mainstream school.
Right. And you make a wonderful point bringing up the neuropsych examination and consulting with a neuropsychologist, especially if a family's on the fence of what setting might be most appropriate and what supports are needed. Like you mentioned earlier, many neuropsychs have very extensive wait lists. Here at Manhattan Psychology Group right now, we're booking out 3 months and ahead, and often we have even a longer wait list, but we do see a peak over the summer months of families looking for evaluations. And it's great to see that so many people are seeking out that level of support so that they can make informed decisions.
That is true. So now that you have seen this overview of what the process looks like and how long it takes to get through it, I apologize. There is some banging above my head, and there's nothing I can do about it. But in any case, I'll work around it. I'm so sorry. So now that you've understood the process, we're going to talk about the support you can get to help you identify what schools you should be looking at and who can be the most helpful in that process. There are many sources to help families curate a school list that can best meet a child's learning needs and interests. I recommend by beginning with your current school's admissions department. They can help get you started with a list and familiarize you with the process ahead. Neuropsychologists and education attorneys can also help families with ideas for special education schools to consider. They've done testing on students, they have worked with families, and they can sometimes be very valuable in this process and help you determine which direction which group of schools you may want to consider. You can also supplement with outside support by reaching out to organizations like the Parents League, who can guide you with school recommendations, and certainly a great place to start. And then, of course, working with an education advisor will help you with the most personalized level of support, because every step of the way they'll be helping manage your expectations and also guiding you through the process. So you'll be working with someone who will have who's a seasoned professional in the field, and also who intimately understands the process, but also your child, and looking at them from an objective point of view, as well as giving them their full attention. Moving on, we
So
will
we
talk.
have a question in the chat box.
Sorry, I'm not paying attention to the chat. So
It's okay. That's what I'm here for. So the question pertains to public schools. Like if you're applying to a specialized program, such as a gifted and talented public school, do you know if the family would find out about whether or not they were accepted into the gifted and talented public school before they find out about the private school, so that they could consider their public school option before replying yes or no to the private school?
So I don't think the deadlines coincide very well, and that's something that changes with the public schools and the private schools from year to year. So it is important to keep that in mind. And again, having being able to create a timesheet or a an Excel spreadsheet with all these deadlines will help you manage the system well. So I really think that with respect, I have this problem all the time when I work with families who are applying to boarding and day schools, and they have very little time in between to make a decision. So I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, but it makes sense. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this is, Chantel just said mapping it out. So you want to map out your preferences in terms of, what schools am I applying to, and to make these, whether it's a comprehensive Excel sheet or if it's uh, a whiteboard in your home that really spells it out so that everybody is seeing the same information and knows how to navigate the process. But throughout that, as you're navigating the process, as you're putting your applications in, you as a parent, and you want to encourage your child to kind of keep their own list of preferences of what they feel, which schools they feel connected to, which they could see themselves attending, which they really did not feel a strong connection with, what is affordable to your family, what is accessible to your family, and to keep that list with an open mind, because we don't want to end up in a situation where you are fully invested in a school that you might not gain acceptance into, but at the same time, you don't want to accept a placement in a school where you don't feel like it's a good fit.
That's true. That's true. So I'm going to go back along this path here about the mainstream, because I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about the public school options. I was focusing on mainstream and specialized education. So please forgive me for not having that information for you. My work is primarily in mainstream and special education, but in the mainstream education application process, you want to go through this very carefully. You want to be able to have as many touch points as possible, attend as many opportunities as the admissions committees offer, spring tours, fall open houses. You want to be aware that the applications go live in September, so you want to get a jump start in getting those applications out as early as possible. And the initial app usually just includes some biographical information, some short essays, and the application fee. Then you can self-schedule your appointments and like your tours and your interviews, and those appointments go quick. So that's another reason why I'm recommending you apply on the early side. There are application portals like Ravenna that open up on August 1st, and they help you streamline the application process. So you would
I think she's having some construction around the building. So
I apologize again. This is so out of our control. Anyway, so there are processes that you can participate in terms of, populating fields in the Ravenna that you can start doing in August, and that helps streamline the process. Oh my gosh. And then, as you're going through the process, you'll be
So what she was going to say is that as you're going through the process, you're going to be scheduling parent and student interviews and a tour. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but this often becomes one of the most stressful parts of the application process for the family because it occurs in real time. So somewhat different from the application process where you have a larger window where you can fill out an application, you can have others review your application and support you through the application process. The tours and the interviews, those occur in real life. And very often the interviews are very stressful for families who put a lot of pressure on the success of the interview in order to gain admission into the school. We have a question, and the question, oh, yes, she knows that you can't hear her very well. She's working on it. So what can families do? Oh, sorry. What can families do to provide support when there are a lot of stress surrounding these interviews? One of the suggestions that many families find helpful is practicing interviewing and the different skills that one might need to be successful in an interview.
Yes.
It's not.
Actually,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Francine, I'm so sorry. I sent my husband upstairs to help them stop the drilling. Anyway, so I think interview prep is certainly something that's very helpful. It allows you to practice talking about yourself, and you want your child to be familiar with every school they're going to be visiting. So going over on websites with them, some programs that might be interesting to them that will help them engage in meaningful conversations with the schools during their interviews. And of course, that is for older students. Younger students will participate in something more relaxed, a play visit, and sometimes it's individualized, sometimes it's with a number of other students together in a group. And in the younger play interviews, those are, as I said, more relaxed, but they are supervised by teachers and admissions directors, and the support and it's important to provide families with some level of support so that you can make a young child feel comfortable as well. And sometimes that's just practicing talking to them about what their interests are and engaging in a reading activity with them and helping them sustain their attention for more than 5 or 10 minutes, and teaching, role modeling a little bit and teaching them how to ask a few questions, and asking them a few questions as they're reading a story. So the process of an interview does not have to be stressful. I think that when a child is prepared and feels comfortable for what's to come, that's something that can help ease their nerves and allow them to show their best selves. As a parent, you also want to be supportive of your child and reinforce how they should try and be their best selves, but also give them opportunities to engage in the process and feel like they have some ownership in it as well. Parents together can work by being role models in this process. I think that what they do during the interview process and during the application process by showing up and taking notes during open houses and being engaged and sitting down with their child and talking about each interview or each engagement that they've had with the school. I think that allows the child to feel heard, understood, and also part of the process. So the application is the interview rather is a really big piece of this, and it's wonderful when everyone's involved and feels comfortable and able to speak comfortably about themselves. We're on the slide on mainstream education, so we jumped ahead a little bit when we were talking about the interview process. But just to finish up here, and I do have word that I won't have any more drilling, so I apologize. Let's see. So we've gone over the mainstream education process. We know when we have to complete our second part of the application, what it includes, and that we'll be following ISAGNY deadlines for that purpose. For special education applications, You usually begin with an open house to visit the school, to become more familiar with what they provide and the types of students that they accept. If you feel that that sounds like a good fit for your child, you'll be completing an application. And that application usually includes a lot of information, of biographical information, short essays, but also your entire child's learning profile, which will include a current neuropsych evaluation, if you have any related service providers who have provided any progress reports, and perhaps an IEP. And as I said, you know, in this case, the neuropsych evaluation or the psychoed evaluation is a major part of this application. Usually after the file is reviewed, the admissions committee will reach out to the family and have them come in for a parent interview or a tour, and a parent interview and a child interview. Child interviews in special education schools usually involve a class visit. Sometimes they come in to spend a half a day, sometimes they come in to spend a whole day, but special education schools are very familiar with how quickly or how much time rather a student may need to warm up to the admissions process. So they know that it's helpful to see a child twice. They also will help engage you in honest conversations about about your child. So feel free to talk about the things that concern you, to also be very upfront about what helps your child be successful in the classroom setting. After the process has completed, meaning after you have submitted your application, your child has been in for an interview and spent time visiting with the class, and you've also had your parent interview, you will probably receive a feedback from the school, from the admissions team within 2 to 3 weeks after the interview. And that's actually the nice part about the nicest part about this process, is that you have a quick turnaround. So you will be given a certain amount of time to respond. And then again, managing deadlines for this process is a little different than managing deadlines that are designated by a group like ISAGNI. So there are no deadlines that are consistent with the special education schools. So that's important that it will be important for you as a family to manage this very closely. The types of testing that a child may be taking. So there are 2 types of tests that you can take for private schools, and that one of them is the IC, the Independent School Educational Evaluation, or the SSAT, the Secondary School Admissions Test. And the Secondary School Admissions Test was primarily used by boarding schools, but now independent schools accept that one for high school as well. And the IC is, as I said, given from grades 2 to 12. And now since COVID, many of the private schools are returning to this testing as being part of the application process. This will offer an admissions committee a little bit more data on a child's ability to respond to the 4 sections of that test, 2 are reading, 2 are math, and there's an additional writing section. While this is not in itself considered, let's say, the most important part or a bigger portion of the application process, it is one that can highlight concerns if the scores are very low or too scattered. So that's there's a reason why you want to make sure that your student is being well prepared and has had a chance to practice taking these tests. For the special education schools, the types of testing that will be required, as previously said, as part of the application process, will be a neuropsych or a psychoed, usually within the last 2 years. And just one other thing, even if you are participating in a mainstream school application process and taking an IC test, some private schools have their own entrance assessments as well. Oftentimes they're for placement purposes, but they also help with understanding a student's eligibility for their program. So, how to prepare for an interview. We did talk about this quite a bit previously through the noise, but I find that being prepared for an interview helps reduce the stress on everyone, the parents, the student, being familiar with what a school provides, their pedagogies, their mission, to make sure that you're in line with that, with their processes and their beliefs. And also it helps a student talk about themselves in a way that is pertinent to the school. So if they can share interests about themselves and how they can see themselves participating in a program, that's very, very helpful, especially when the school offers those programs. It's helpful for a student to practice speaking about their interests, about their favorite subjects and their strengths, and also answering questions about themselves. What are their strengths? What subjects they prefer the most? And when they perhaps they've faced a challenge in their lives, how did they overcome that challenge? Schools want to get to know the child in a way that does not jump off the page of an application, to learn more about their story, to learn more about who they are and how resilient a learner they are, and why they would be able to hit the ground running at a certain school. So educate yourselves and identify the programs that attract you to each school so that your child is able to talk about them and you as well. And always come prepared with questions. Asking questions at the end of an interview shows interest and shows that you've done your homework to get to know the school.
Excellent. So we have another question. If a family is applying to both mainstream and special education schools, is it recommended to wait to apply for the special education school until after they heard whether or not they got accepted into the mainstream school? Because you often hear so quickly from the special education school.
So the special education schools will not notify during the admission season before January. And in February, you will have your notifications from your private schools. So if you're in the first wave of applications, which is probably where you want to be if you know for sure that's where you're headed, understanding that there are fewer openings after that first wave will probably guide your decision. What makes it more difficult is if you are considering a supportive mainstream school and you're waiting to hear from them, and you have your acceptance to a specialized school, that's when things get a little tricky. So I'm not going to lie to you, it is a difficult time, but sometimes having someone in the middle, like an educational advisor or consultant, can help with that stress and help manage those expectations and be a buffer in between the admissions committee and the family. But it is good to have an open dialogue with the school and explain that you are applying to a supportive mainstream school and that you're trying to gauge whether or not that is a possibility for your child. So having a dialogue with the schools can help maybe extend a deadline or help a school can, let you know if they would keep your child high on the wait list if they are being put on a wait list after you are unable to accept that specialized school. So hoping with stress, I'm going to let you take this one.
Sure. So we spoke about some of these throughout the presentation, and the interview prep is going to alleviate a lot of the stress of what do I say? How do I answer questions? What kind of questions do I ask? But also when it comes to the interview, there are often the minute details that make a big difference the interview day, such as making sure that your child feels comfortable in what they're wearing. If they are wearing new shoes for the first time and those new shoes are uncomfortable, they might not be their best self during the interview. You also want to make sure you have enough time to arrive at the site without any stress. You don't want to be running late. That could often increase stress. And we want families to go in feeling comfortable, kids to feel like they are ready instead of that they're rushed. Sometimes for some children who put a lot of pressure on themselves or parents who feel that this is very stressful, there's a lot of anxiety leading up to an interview and it becomes a very big date. So scheduling a special activity to do after that interview or after different components of the application process are completed is really reinforcing for both the parents and the family. That way, that Wednesday that you had the interview at your favorite school doesn't just turn into an interview Wednesday, but interview Wednesday. And then we went out to such a special lunch and took a walk. And after that, I got to buy this brand new lipstick and I'm so excited about the lipstick. It could be such little things, special memories, little activities, going for ice cream. Those are the things that take the pressure off of the interview itself and make the experience that much more rewarding for both the children and the parents. You also want to give your child ample opportunities to express themselves throughout the process. So checking in with them, ask them how they're feeling. What did it feel like being in that school? You know, do you have any thoughts about this school? Do you have any thoughts about the process? And you want to just ask them these open-ended questions and allow them to speak freely. We want them to feel safe expressing their thoughts, their feelings, their interests, and also their fears. And we want to listen to understand instead of listening to responding. Because as parents, we're very quick to try to help our children. And in doing that, we often try to solve their problems. But in this particular situation, there's not a problem to solve. We're just navigating a process together. So we really want to take the child's insight and their reflection into consideration. And if they're afraid that what they share might not be aligned with how their parents feel or that their parents' wishes are, they might be less likely to share. Then when it comes to parents, parents are often asking, like, what do I say to support my child? How do I respond to them when they express worry or fear or disinterest or frustration? So we want to use what is called a supportive statement to validate how the child is feeling. So a supportive statement has two parts. It validates the feeling that the child is experiencing in that moment in time. And then it provides encouragement by reinforcing the child's ability to do that difficult thing. So I know that this is scary and I know that you could do it, or I know that this is hard and I know that you will do well. So you want to make those two statements together in response to a child expressing frustration. Because if we're not validating their feelings, nah, you're fine, then the child might not feel heard or they might feel unsupported. But if we only say, yes, it's so scary, it's going to be okay, but not supporting that the child does have the ability to do it, then they might not feel confident in themselves. Another thing that we often encounter with parents is that parents tend to have a hard time not openly expressing their preferences or opinions. And a parent or even a child's preference might not lead to an offer. So for parents and children, because children often follow their parents' lead, to remain open-minded and impartial throughout the interviewing process. Keep notes about what you liked about different programs, what you didn't like about different programs, but try to not share your strong preferences directly with your child. Often parents talk about these things to themselves, but to still stay open-minded. You know what? On this day, I didn't like this, but I did like this, and maybe I could follow up. So that you want to really wait until we openly share opinions, until all the interviews are completed, because kids are also really silly, especially younger kids, and they tend to repeat what their parents have said too. So if your younger child perhaps heard at the dinner table that this is our second choice, they might share that during an interview process with a school, or tell another kid during a play group, oh, you know, I don't even know if I'm really coming here. It's not my mommy's first choice. So we want to be very cautious about what we're sharing, because it could influence our child's thinking about the process. It could influence their presentation, and it can also bias their opinion. And then, lastly, with parents, communication between parents is really essential in all areas of parenting, but especially throughout the interview process. So for parents to make sure that they're communicating with each other, again, privately, not within earshot of a child, to ensure that they're on the same page throughout the interview process. And that's just really important, from selecting schools to apply to, and also right through accepting schools. You want to make sure that the school is a school that both parents would feel comfortable having their child attend. If one parent is very interested in a school and one parent is completely disinterested in a school, you want to ask yourself, is this a school that we even want to apply to? Because if the child gained acceptance and the disinterested parent was not gaining more interest after attending an open house, after touring the school, then perhaps that might not be the right fit school for your family. So to check in, make sure you're on the same page, make sure that the schools that you are applying to are accessible to your family. Thinking about, how are you going to fund school? How are you going to get your child to school? How are you going to navigate all the extracurriculars and other activities that come along with school? And does that fit into your family culture? And if it doesn't, that's okay. There's different schools for everyone, and there's no fits all for schools. It's really a very personal decision. So that's the presentation. We are going to open up the chat. So if anyone has any questions, they could put them in the Q&A or ask questions in the chat, and that way we could address any questions or concerns you have about the process or about navigating the stress.
We also had some questions come in as people registered for the event. So if you guys want to answer some of those. The first one I have is for how to best manage your child's anxiety and ODD while looking and applying to schools.
Okay. Chantal, do you want to take it or should I?
So I think that would be one for you.
Okay, sounds good. So both any kind of behavior or any kind of anxiety is something that you're addressing really on a day-to-day basis. So the strategies that would work before going to a doctor's appointment or before going to a family event are the same strategies that you're going to use as you're navigating the process. You want your child, with anxiety, it's often the fear of the unknown. So you want them to be fully aware of what they can expect throughout the process. Who will be there at the interview? How many other people will be there at the interview? The more prepared that they feel, the less anxious that they're going to be. And then if we're concerned about oppositional behaviors, we want to make sure that the child is prepared for what demands are going to be put on them. Because if the child knows what to expect, then they will be less resistant. And we can also role play different ways to navigate what might be a triggering or a difficult question or situation. So a child could say, I don't feel comfortable, or I'm not sure about that question, and then avoid having a behavioral spiral.
A couple of things I'd like to add to that is, it's always possible for families to ask admissions directors what their child will be doing during their visit, how long it will take, what will be the expectation for the child, because you can always, especially when you're applying to a specialized school, they certainly understand how children can get nervous, even if they're not normally anxious or they're not typically a child that worries. Being in an interview situation is new and can cause some form of anxiety or a worry or concern and feel a little stressful to a child. So it's certainly within normal course of things to ask an admissions director what can be expected, and also to help. Totally agree with Francine, helping your child prepare for that event, role playing with them, helping them understand what's to come and how to get them excited about things so that they have things to focus on. But also, if you feel that your child did not do very well after that first visit, right? They come home and maybe you got a little bit of some feedback when you picked up your child, or they came home and didn't feel great. This is also an opportunity for you to engage with the admissions director again and say, I think my child could do better on a second visit. Maybe the first one, I'm not hearing he felt as comfortable or may have been completely himself given the newness of the situation. And I would really like to have him come back for a second visit. And honestly, that is something that most schools will entertain.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, another question we had is, are there any bilingual services or resources available for this application process?
To my knowledge, all the applications are in English. However, there are services that provide translation and, it depends on if you're going through the mainstream process or if you're going through a special ed process. So for families that are not completely English speaking, I'm sure there are services that can help with the application process. But for the most part, these schools do teach in English, and some may have ESL programs, but that's not typically how these programs are run.
Okay, thanks. How do you know what school is right for your child?
Oh my God. That is such a broad question. So I think having multiple touch points with a school is going to help identify whether or not a school feels like a right fit. If you have an opportunity to visit a classroom and if you could see your child in that environment, so many different opportunities that the admissions committees offer for you to get to know their school, even to listening to panel discussions or the head of school coffee chats, things like that. I really feel those are helpful opportunities for you to understand more and more and more. Certainly, if you're being guided by someone who has the intimate knowledge about a school, that's going to be extremely helpful. But absent of that, speak to other people who may have attended the school. If you have friends with children who attend, ask them how they're enjoying their experience. Even if you want to just, and I don't recommend this as a behavior, but sometimes just hanging out outside of the school at pickup time, you get a feel for who the families are and a little bit about the children. So that might be a good way to also feel more comfortable about a school.
Right. And then use your own personal network once you have offers to speak to current families that are attending that school. Does anyone know anyone that attends school XYZ? I'm sure, especially in this social media age, that you'll be able to get a number of contacts that you could touch base with directly and then ask them about their experience and see if you speak to 2 or 3 different families, are those families that you align with in terms of your interests, your desires, the type of academic setting that you want to see your child in.
Thank you. All right, another one we had come in is, what can we do to support parents in feeling prepared and not letting anxiety negatively affect their child?
Right. So we talked about this a little bit, and a lot of the anxiety comes along with not knowing what to expect. So the better prepared you are, the less anxious you'll be. So really starting early is the key. You want to give yourself more than enough time to know which schools to apply to get your application in, to prepare for the interview. So being proactive throughout the process and starting early is the best way to manage anxiety. And that way you're not missing a deadline or, worried that you didn't get something in on time. You'll be in that first round, even with the rolling admissions, and you'll be setting your child and your family up for the best chance at success.
I also think if you open yourself up to keeping an open mind and you know, an attitude that this is exciting, this is a learning process, this is something wonderful to make a transition, and everyone's, you know, I don't see, I mean, I guess because I do this for a living, I don't see it as a negative uh, um, uh, experience, but more of one that's exciting and one where, okay, we're about to start something new and learn something new, and we're going to do this together, and we are going, and planning ahead is so key. Being prepared is so key. Having those deadlines in mind in advance is very helpful to alleviate anxiety, but also not taking it personally. This is not these schools don't make decisions based on you personally. They're making decisions sometimes based on things that are variables that don't have anything to do with your child. So make sure that you have a wide and broad school list of at least 7 to 8 schools that you're considering. And usually that process will end up in a very positive way.
Right. When do you know it's time to pull back and allow a team to take over the application process?
By team, do you mean an educational consultant, advisor?
Sorry, no, like a teenager, a teen.
A teen, I'm sorry. So when applying for high school, I will not kid you, it is your child that is driving this process. It is good to have discussions about, you know, your feelings and understanding each other's opinions about schools. In other words, at some point when you have your acceptances, you have already a list of schools that you know are interested in your child, and for the most part for high school, the team can go back and do a revisit. And that, I think, is a crucial part of the process. I didn't speak about it earlier, but after being accepted, the high schools offer revisit days. The private high schools offer revisit days for the students to come in and spend a full day with their cohort that they may be in 9th grade with, or 10th grade, or whatever grade they're applying to. And that is quite enlightening. And sometimes it means that you have to step back and allow your team to say, you know, I really felt more comfortable with this group of kids, or I really enjoyed the pace of instruction more in this particular school. I felt more comfortable. This is a time when you have to listen to your team, because this is where they are going to be attending school for their high school careers, and sometimes this is through middle school. You want to make sure that you are incorporating their concerns and validating their interests and everything that their feelings about their experience at the school. So that is the point when you're going to have to relinquish control and give that up to your child to help really spearhead that decision in which school they're going to be attending.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that is all the time that we have for any other questions today. If you guys had questions that you submitted over the next couple of weeks, we will be answering some of them on our social media platforms. If your question is not answered, you can feel free to email professional development at Manhattan Psychology Group, and I will drop that in the chat so everybody has it. But overall, thank you to Francine and Chantal and everybody for joining us today. We are finished with today's presentation. However, again, if you do have any questions, please reach out, because all are here to support you. So I will leave this up so everybody has a second to jot down some of these web addresses or click on them. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I hope this was
Thank you.
very insightful. So thank you, Chantal and Francine.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed participating. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day.